Kasongo, please, they can't hear you. So maybe which channel are you? Okay. Maybe I should just off translation now. So I think they can hear you now. Okay. Please go ahead. All right. Can you?
Social geography. She advocates for the improvement, the quality of life for women and girls, for vulnerable and disadvantaged backgrounds, gender-based violence victims or survivors, sexual and gender minorities. She's also a consultant on issues related SOGIs. SOGIs stands for sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. LGBTQ motivates, and GBV. GBV stands for gender-based violence. She has several achievements to her credit as a human rights defender and psychosocial counselor. As a committed feminist who is sensitive to human rights in their universality, she has made the promotion of gender equality or equity, the well-being of women and girls, the defense of sexual minorities and vulnerable people her main preoccupation. Her commitment to vulnerable people, sexual and gender minorities has been noticeable since 2012, which has led to her to integrate several women's networks and movements. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us welcome Renee. That's the end of her biography.
Thank you.
Over to you, Mukule.
Okay, thank you very much. So Renee sent us a paper in French, which I've translated into English. So I'm going to present on her behalf because Ine is not, she's not with us today. So I'm going to read a paper which I've translated into English.
Mute yourself if the sound is coming from your side. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so today, like in many African countries that have been colonized, the Cameroonian legal environment penalized homosexuality in its article 347. The idea is that in African societies, homosexuality is a colonial import. For Africans, it has always been easier to say that it is a practice that came with the white colonizer, that has never been part of African culture. Yet, when we build on our tribes' oral histories and ancestral practices, we find that there is evidence that before the settler arrived, homosexuality was well known, practiced, accepted, and included in different African cultures. So in order to dispel this myth, constructed by African homophobic conservatives, that homosexuality is a practice imported from the colonizer to destroy real African values. One of the objectives means to verify these assumptions by showing those ancestral practices, which can give us the keys to understand what was required. For example, drawing from materials from and the writing from researchers in Cameroon. And I will also try to show some homosexual practices in ritual, and I will end by showing some homosexual practices in some African languages. So number one, it's about showing homosexual practices in in historical constructions. Starting with an example in Angola, the first homosexual experiments are among boys, sometimes from the same family, which aims to increase confidence among people in the community. At the same time, girls are strictly prohibited from having sex with the opposite sex. That is why homosexuality was more common among young people, boys, and boys among themselves, and girls among themselves. Such practices were done secretly, in the absence of adults, as in the Waheye ethnic group. The secrecy was not always strict, as in the case of Ganjela. So unlike the Waheye, in the Ganjela tribe, for example, an unmarried circumcised boys who is about 18 years old could decide to live with another 12-year-old boy who liked him. He was going to meet his parents and make the official request to live with him, and that was called Katumua. He gave parents present like a cow, clothes, and money. If the parent accepted, the two were officially recognized as living in a relationship. Later, the marriage of the greatest with a partner of the other sex did not change the relationship. Alternatively, he could have sex with his wife, and subsequently with his Katumua, the younger child grew up and also wished to marry another sex partner. In this example, what René is saying that in Angola, one could be in a relationship with an older boy, could be in a relationship with a younger boy, and that was accepted. And the older boy could at some point married and have sex with, still have sex with the younger boy. And René also gives an example in the Cameroonian context, where he talks about children who were viewed as socially asexual. They were not assigned any gender role. For example, in the Bafia of Cameroon, boys who did not yet have sex with girls belong to the first socially recognized stage of individual growth. The term referring to them is Kiembe. The Bafia recognized three main stages of growth. It was from this first step that the boys' same-sex relations began in the game. And in these typical cases, it is a question of homosexuality based on the age model, and where one of the partner is a little older than the other. It is the oldest who most often plays the active role. And it is true that exceptional cases of young people who played an active role in older people have also been reported, particularly among the Nkundo of Congo. The second part is talks about homosexuality in rituals, homosexuality in rituals. In some rituals, homosexual practices sometimes appeared. This ritual could be used to transform the sexual status of individuals. For example, the Mevungu in Cameroon was a rite that included touching between women with a highly homosexual character. It was presented according to its followers as a celebration of the clitoris and the power of women. This exclusively female rite included dances that sometimes amounted to intercourse, and in which all the women play the male role. In northwestern Zambia, the Munkanda ritual was a special, was done for male circumcision. Insider used to use the penis of the older initiator. This act was seen as making the gender of the younger or the new boy stronger, as was the gender of the initiator. In other neighboring groups like Luvale, Balovale, Chokwe, Luchazi, Lucho, and Lunda, boys remained naked throughout the first phase of the initiation, where they recovered health after circumcision. During this period of post-healing, they looked after themselves by playing with the penises of the gods of the initiatory lodges. These acts were seen as accelerating healing and healing. Homosexuality in the absence of men and women. Among the Azande of the Southwest Sudan or the Nkundo in the Congo, the homosexuality of women was practiced in the houses of the polygams. These young women in the Azande, for example, were in harems. To avoid adultery, they were closely monitored by men. This resulted in homosexual practices. This was also the case for women of Muslim harems in North Africa, or for women of Hausa origin in Nigeria. Among Azande women, the sexual relationship between them was made with the help of the items like cassava, banana, etc. Among women in Zanzibar, sexual satisfaction was through the tribal kusagana or cunnilingus. Kulambana through a wooden penis called Kijitia Mboyamingo. This practice was also found in Wahia women who did so in the absence of men, in addition to the mutual masturbations. So in this part, what Renee is saying that homosexuality was also practiced between men themselves because of certain circumstances. For example, being kept away from men for a long time, or because men were at war, then women had to have some kind of, to pleasure themselves, or men who were fighting also engaged in homosexual practices while they were fighting. Then Renee talks about the concept of homosexuality in some African languages. In Angola, for example, an ethnic group called Quimbandas, which is sodomy, was common among men. Those who had sex with people of the same sex were also referred to as Kimbanda. Kimbanda basically is those who have sex with men. So there's a word in that ethnic group to call men who have sex with men, Kimbandas, in Angola. Among the Waheye, builders of the Bango Plateau, still in Angola, homosexuality was confused to bisexuality, and it was called Omututa, which means precisely the active or passive aspect of anal sex. Mutual masturbation, very common among those who had sex with people of the other sex, as well as those who had sex with people of the same sex, was referred to as Okuli Koweka. In the eastern Wahia region, the Eponji design are designated among the Ovingangelas. The phrase Katumua Kame also translates the same reality as my daughter, and by extension, my lover. So intercourse was translated as homosexual intercourse was translated as Mahanda, and is still so far in the Wahie region. In Zanzibar, in the Tanzanian, passive and anal penetration is called kufirwa, reflect the fact that it is men can be anally penetrated. Lesbian practices in Zanzibar are translated by kulambana, licking one another. It is derived from the verb lamba, which means to lick, and also designate cunnilingus. Still talking about lesbian practices, we also can talk about kujitia mbowampingo, which means to get a black wooden penis. So among the Hausa of northern Nigeria, male homosexuality is referred to as Dan Kashile. However, there's much more well-known institution called Dan Daudo, plural Yan Daudo. That is literally the son of Daudo. The Daudo refer to the practice of men who act as women and who go to bed with men. They also serve as agents of for prostitutes, agents of prostitutes. Kawalai, a kind of pimps or intermediate agents. Culturally, this practice is understood in terms of gender rather than sexuality. Men who have sex with men are said masu harka, those who do the things or the business. Its abbreviation is masuyi, those who do the thing. When the Yan Daudu meet, they call themselves kawaii, girlfriends. When they have sex in the same group, they call it kifi, lesbianism, even though they are the phenotypically speaking, phonetically. Okay, so and then René concludes his paper by saying that he makes three conclusions. Africa in its history has experienced various types of homosexuality, sometimes occasional, sometimes links to identity and power, sometimes outside heterosexual orthodoxy. Each sexual act was well defined and linguistically qualified, so to some extent conceptualized. There are many areas where a linguistic vacuum has been observed for homosexuality, but a linguistic vacuum does not mean the absence of homosexual practices in the African context. At most, it is evidence of unmodeled sexual practices in these cultural areas. That's everything. Thank you. So this is a paper sent by, as I said, by René, and we could not make it today, but there's an English translation for it. So I can also send to anyone who would be interested to read. Thank you. Over to you, Irene.
Okay, Irene, can you unmute yourself? Irene?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We have, thank you so much, Mukile. Do we have our guest? Do we have him here now?
Yes. Let me check.
Tab. Is it tab? Because I refuse to admit, we're trying to ensure that we only admit those that we know for this event. So
yeah.
Is it the one that is tab? If it's the one that is
Yes.
tab, is tab. Is it the one that called THAPS?
Yes, he is Tabs. Yeah, the full name is Tapel.
Okay. And he wants
But I can't see him on my list. Can you see him on your list?
I admitted him.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Does
Yes.
he want to stay anonymous? Oh, okay. Hand it over to you. You can. Does he want to stay anonymous? Right?
Okay.
Is he still anonymous? Is he still not identifying himself? Right? So that I can make the participants to know the context now.
No, that one I don't know. It's not invited by me.
Okay, so let's. Oh, Tab, you are not the one who invited Tab, right?
No, I'm the one who invited him.
Okay, so let's ask
Tab
him.
is a referent.
So let's ask
He's
him.
a referent.
Okay.
Yes, he's a Methodist referent, and he works very closely with the LGBTQ groups in Lesotho.
Okay, so he can start his video and introduce himself to us, or you can introduce him so that the participant will know the context, and then we can be able to get his impact before we have this conversation.
Okay. Tab, Rev, can you unmute your mind and please introduce yourself to the group? Because I think everyone is excited that at least we have a referent amongst us.
Not just that alone, we need to hear from what he's doing with the LGBT community and
Yes.
how the law the laws of the land has obstructed them from expressing themselves in Africa. So we're giving him that audience. And if you want to stay anonymous, we have people who want to stay anonymous, but if you want to still introduce himself, he doesn't want to show his face, we can stay. We understand the context. So can he? Is he able to unmute himself?
Let me tell you, can you mute yourself?
Okay, while you sort that, we're going to have this conversation on what we have listened to from Rene. And okay, it's highly a little bit controversial because Rene made a reference to some part of Africa that is outside our region. Because I feel to a great extent that she refers to the northern part of Nigeria. She made reference to some other cultures in Africa, which she I'm
sorry about that.
Which she believes that they practice that. But you know, I just want to find out, do we have some references, Mukile, to the claim that she has made in that particular paper?
Yes, of course. It's a paper. The reference, because it's taken from the research of Charles Guebo. I don't know if I'm saying that. Charles Guebo, who is a Cameroonian sociologist. So it's something that has been it's coming from a research, not just our own thought. It's coming from a research.
I think for me as a person, if I'm to offer my own contribution in response to part of what the claim she has made, I would say that making reference to traditional African society and talking about the past of Africa, that it may be this practice, according to anthropologists, existed, and they can say, okay, we find it, and does it exist as a norm or as an anomaly? You know, does it exist as a kind of what we can say psychological problem that people, certain category of people in the society, we can say they are going through, or can we say that it's something that is part and parcel of the culture? You know, and that's one of the major questions that comes to mind when some scholars begin to say, oh, what we call it, homosexuality is actually African and it existed in Africa. Another part of it, a reaction to our paper, will be the whole idea of the African structure and values. In Africa, we know that there's this categories, what we can talk about, the ontological category of personhood. And then we know that a man is clearly defined, a woman is clearly defined, and the whole understanding of family life, it's either is nuclear or extended, and this nuclear and extended family is interconnected too, because it flows into the other. And when this is something that we can say, okay, this is African culture, or something that cut across most African nations that are shared. And central to this whole idea of family life and marriage and gender role is this whole the main concept of procreation. And the whole arguments that has been presented forward why this is said to be un-African is that any act or any social structure that is being introduced that is not within this ontological framework in Africa, we're not talking about anomalies, you know, that is being introduced is un-African. That is the position that is being, and any part of arrangement of a family structure that does not facilitate procreation, which you know, the whole idea of procreation is not just for itself in African ontological worldview. It's not just procreation for the sake of procreation, but the coming back of ancestors, or the whole what we can say, the whole circle of life, then we say that it does not fit into the framework. So when we have some of these presentations, like when we have it's African, it existed in Africa, you know, is there the argument that says this fit into the ontological framework? And because what we know that can be African will be the whole idea of maybe virginity, purity, and the sustaining of this family structure that facilitate procreation to encourage what we can say the ancestral cycle. You know, so this is highly controversial, and we are not saying, or for instance, I'm not saying that the proponents of the theory that LGBTQ practices is un-African. I'm not saying the proponents are right when we are evaluating them from the point of view of human rights, or from the point of view of the freedom, which is a kind of a tenet within the framework of democracy that is being practiced in Africa. So we can be able to say from the framework of democracy that is being practiced in Africa, yes, women have the rights, every human person has the rights, people have to be protected under this freedom of expression. But when we're talking about culture or social structure or ontological framework, we still, to a great extent, the argument that is un-African still holds, you know. And I don't know if we have participants here who want to speak to this before we go to the other aspects of the conversation, which we want to have a case study of some people who are members of the community, LGBT community in Africa. So before we go invite any of them to speak, or we would like to see what's your own reaction to this, the Africanness and non-Africanness of this LGBTQ from the point of view of the ontology and social structure. So you can indicate, you can join this by raising your hand or by dropping that in the chat before we now move to the next phase. So, or you can unmute yourself. We have enabled the unmute button, and you can unmute yourself and join this. So please, let's come in. Who has the hand up? We have one hand up now. You can unmute yourself and come in. That's Oluwafemi Atoyebi Akinlawan from Abuja, Nigeria. Please, you can show your camera, unmute yourself and speak. Akinlawan.
All right, thank you so much. I totally agree with you. I mean, the speaker, the last speaker, what I'm seeing beneath your picture is African Research Network. I totally agree with your position. I only have something to add, which is the fact that most of these, to me, they are anomaly, in the sense that if you look at all these, new, things that often take the toga of, something new, or what I can refer to as, newness of, sexual orientation. I want to see it as a kind of reaction. Most of these, LGBT, or let me say homosexuality of a thing, their reaction that is, prompted from what I can call depression, psychological depression. They are a reaction that I can say, bettered by, some kind of social stratification that some people have, been, how can I even put it now? They have been suffering for a very long time. For example, I don't know if you are conversant with this film, October 1. Permit me to make reference to that film. That film, if you look at the character that is said to be exercising or practicing homosexuality, we discover that the person has really been defied by the Catholic priest in that particular film. So in essence, his own reaction now as an homosexual, is somehow linked with his defilement in that particular film. And I'm looking at it that if for any reason, every man always have a kind of reaction against every form of stigmatization, or against any form of psychological whip or attack. And I can say, in the aspect of sexual orientation, if a man in any reason power is in any way is deprived of this, right of meeting a woman, having a woman as a wife, or a man is, suffering from this kind of stratification, definitely there will be this psychological reaction of, directing his, urge towards a man or a fellow man like himself. There is a paper I read like that, written by one Dr. Johnny. In that paper, he narrated his experience of the first homosexual in his hometown, which happens to be Osu in Osun State. He said these people were Hausas. They are Northerners. They are two, Northerners. They are so close to the sense that people looked at them as husband and wife, because perhaps they must have been caught in that kind of act. And from his own discovery, he discovered that he said that these people have been denied in several ways from, having, women to their self in that particular community. So as you have said, it's a misnomer in the sense that every abnormalities is as a result of deprivation that one must have, encountered. And I want to say this: you saying that this thing is African is trying to politicize it.
Thank you very much.
Every human in every human society.
Sorry,
okay.
Sorry to cut you short. We will take other interventions.
Okay.
The position that was made is we presented a position that those who feel that is abnormal and those who felt it's a psychological problem. And you are reinforcing that by bringing some cases and also the ones you have seen from experience as well as what you have read. So thanks for your contribution. Dr. Jim Paris can come in. Let's make our contribution brief because we still have other presenter. So Dr. Jim Paris, please come in. Dr. Jim, you can unmute yourself and come in. You're allowed, it's your turn.
Yeah, sorry, here we go. Hi, hello everybody. I was very interested to hear the paper Michele was read. I was also, I became nervous, like I think many of us would have, that it contained that tone of like anthropological kind of discourse that kind of objectifies, it seems to objectify the African. At least that's my emotional response when I have that. But the point is that the variety of sexual orientation and behavior it painted, I think was good vis-a-vis African culture, because that's the whole point. We have to throw and understand African culture as the real world, and that's the beauty of it. That's the importance of it. It's real, but similarly, the real world is complicated. You know, there is homosexuality. But that in no way conflicts with the idea of African cultural ideas, philosophy, religion, in any way, at all. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jim. And at this point, we're going to take Reverend Tab to just, as Irene has introduced him, as a reverend in Lesotho. He has been in touch with people who identify themselves as LGBT community. And at this webinar, the conversation we are having is to talk about the laws made in Africa against homosexuality. And if African nations, we are practicing democracy and people have freedom of expression, even if they are the minority, do we need a majority to have a kind of tyranny against them? Or if it's true that people are born to have attraction to people of opposite sex, then why should people who were born that way be denied or be beaten on the street, as we have the case, for instance, in Nigeria, or to be in prison, as we have in some African countries that have already placed ban against them. So while we're preparing for today's webinar, we asked some people who are LGBTQ members and who want to come, but they are afraid because they feel that if they're going to come up, it's either they're anonymous or people are going to speak ill at them, or people are going to think they have psychological problem, or people are going to condemn them. So, but if we can have Reverend now, if you can tell us his own experience in working with them and how the struggle has been. So, Reverend, you have this slot now. You can unmute yourself and speak before we move to the next stage for today's conversation. Taps.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Thapelo Julius Rantle from Lesotho. I'm a minister of Wesleyan Methodist Church and also happen to be the chairperson of Christian Council in our district. Also, I'm a dialogue facilitator for these issues. In fact, our subject during this discussions is the role of the churches in the context of violence on marginalized groups such as LGBTI people. Now, we as a church here in Lesotho, our stance is on the human dignity, because we are saying the human dignity is inherent in every human being. So what we are now doing, or where we are at the moment, we are still engaging with the stakeholders, the village chiefs, the councillors, to make them aware of this homosexuality. That I agree with the doctor. The doctor said there is homosexuality. So we are trying. The safest thing at the moment we are doing here in Lesotho is now we are engaging in dialogues, because we feel that is the safest place for the LGBTI people, where they could get their feelings or their feelings across without being judged, because we create a safe place for them. So now, on the challenges the LGBTI or the LGBTIQ people face here in Lesotho is that so many people, especially here in the rural areas, so many people do not understand homosexuality. In fact, when they see lesbians, women dating other women, they still feel that is against the law. In fact, they take that and compare it to what the scriptures are saying towards that. It has been said that Lesotho is a Christian country. So if they see a man with another man, I don't know, but it's more than a sin in the eyes of my people here in Lesotho. But the church has now begun to talk about this issue, because we realize that there is homosexuality, whether we like it or not. So some of the challenges is that the LGBTIQ people face here is that whenever they try, like if you check Lesotho's context, everything has to be done through village chiefs. Now, whenever maybe they want something done for them, maybe they have to consult the village chiefs. The village chiefs themselves, they are the ones who are supposed to be protecting the people, but they are the ones who discriminate against such people because they do not understand. So we have begun this process of engaging in dialogues in 2019. Unfortunately, 2020 and 2021, we could not do anything much because of this pandemic that we all know about, COVID-19. But we have started, like last year, July, I started going to different villages. It's very difficult, you know. It's very difficult to remove something in the heads of our people that has been there, because they act like this thing. It was like this even before we were here. No man supposed to be going out with another man. It is considered a serious sin here. So there are a lot of challenges here in Lesotho, though I cannot express them fully because I myself am not in such group. I would have loved if I had more people, especially those I'm working with, LGBTQ people, to be part of this seminar, so that they could express fully what challenges they are facing. Because they have said to me during the counseling sessions, they're telling me that especially the transgenders, like a trans woman, you know, the trans women. So
yeah, we know them.
Yes, the trans woman people are the ones who get the beating more than the trans men and everyone, because Lesotho is such a cultural place where everything is defined. For you to be a man, you have to have certain qualities, or you have to go through the initiation process, and that thing has shown to in fact it has failed, because some of these trans women people, they actually went to initiation schools. Maybe they thought they would be correcting them in their own way. They were saying they would correct them, but they would return there still, you see, still like that. So to me and other priests in my position, we realize that there is homosexuality, even though we do not understand. So
thank you. Tab.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think Irene has a question for you now. Please, Irene.
Okay, thank you. Rev, I just want to know, as a priest, when going to village chiefs and try to talk to them or educate them about their homosexuality, how do they look at you? What do you think they think of you as a priest, telling them that we have this kind of people that we live with in our villages and they have to be welcomed? What is the response that you get from the chiefs?
Thank you, Miss Irene. You know, it happened to me last year, September, in one of the villages in Zwedike there. The village chiefs did not want to welcome me there. But because I had arranged with other priests there so that I could use their church, so I had to go through. So I went to the chief, but he could not accept or receive me, saying, how could I, as a minister or as a priest, allow such things? So I tried to talk sense into them that we are not allowing anything. We are just here for dialoguing. We are dialoguing, and we just want to hear what you are saying and hear also what the LGBTI people are saying, because we as a church, we as a church are against violence on them.
Thank you very much. When you started, you actually made mention of the fact that every human person has dignity, and what even though you subscribe to Christian religion, and they may say within the tenets of that Christian belief that such kind of the act or homosexual act is prohibited, and always make reference to the part of when God, what we call it, set Sodom and Gomorrah on fire with mercury, you know, and burns them because of homosexual acts. And so the Christian belief seems to be against that, and the Islamic belief. But you are making mention of the fact that what is above whether Christian law or Christian belief is the human dignity, and every human life should be respected. And when law is not protecting these people, when the society, when you made mention of the village chiefs and others are not protecting these people, then they experience violence against them. But the question is this: do you feel that you are compromising with your Christian belief? One. Number two, do you, contrary to those who felt that this is a psychological thing and a misnomer, do you feel that this is not a misnomer, but something that comes from intimacy and something that, you know, is bred out of love and other values that can be associated with Christianity?
Okay, thank you, sir, for your question. You know, because we are talking, we address the human dignity. Yeah. That is based on our belief that all persons without exception are made in the image of God, Imago Dei. That is what we are teaching as a church. For example, the concept of human dignity is anchored in the belief that every human being, woman, man, girl, or boy, is created in the image of God and has been given a unique position in God's world with the same responsibilities and tasks. That is what we are trying to instill, or to when we're dialoguing, to talk to them, in fact, as ministers or as priests, trying to tell our people here that no man is above another man. The only man who is up there is God, and everyone is made in the image of God. Even though we do not understand the issue of homosexuality, it is against God's laws that we should treat one another badly or mistreat one another.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's this question with regards to law and individual private, what we can say, morality, whether something, and when you belong to a particular society, and what the law says sometimes seems to go against or seems to be superior to individual preferences. We use the case of, let's say, for instance, in England, there have been laws that ban homosexual practices and their freedom of expression in the past. But through dialogue and deliberation and other forms of conversation, you know, they were able to get to this point where LGBTQ practices and expression is being, even though they're still working on it, there are still movements and activists trying to fight against, and the same thing in many Western countries. But in Africa, you know, you made mention of there's this social structure, because we know that even though we have democracy and president and all these things, but they are on their own, they have their own governance, but we still have what we can say the structure of our society, where we have religious leaders, community leaders, and heads of the families. You know, people who are heads of the families, and the head of the family, an individual will come out to the head of the family to say, please, in this family, I'm actually a lesbian, and I'm attracted towards a person of opposite sex. So if I'm going to bring a partner, I'm going to bring someone. If I'm a lady, I'm going to bring a lady. And then the head of the family needs to convince the community leaders, right? And then that still needs to extend like that to before we can have acceptance. Now, you have been talking about the process in which you are, you know, you counsel them, or you work with them, and they are still on the IDE. We have two of them who wanted to speak with us, or members of LGBT community in an African country who wanted to speak with us today, but who refused to, or who did not show up at the end of the day. But what do you think are the, what we can say, knowledge framework that you will need in order to convince the structural framework of our African society so that they can be accepted, the way we can say in Western country that they pass through a lot of processes and deliberation before they are accepted. So what are the intellectual frameworks that you think are needed, or what do you think can be done to actually get the voice of the government to remove laws against them in your country and other African countries?
Okay, sir, thank you for your question again. Again, the only tool that could get the point across is through dialogues, because that is where we put, that is the safest place for everyone to voice his or her opinion freely, without favor or fear. So it will take time, especially in my own country here in Lesotho. It will take time, but at least we have some priests. It's not only myself, but in all the 10 districts of Lesotho, we have representatives, the priests, who are doing the same work that I'm doing here this side, just to sensitize our community through this idea of violence against marginalized people such as LGBTQ. The main thing we as the church are trying to instill or to say there is that human dignity is inherent in every human being. So St. Paul says we are all one body. I'm sorry.
Okay, Tabs, can you hold on before you make that quotation? We're going to have two interventions, one from Benjamin Timi, from Cameroon, and we have one intervention already dropped by Anthony in the chat, which is he quoted Alasdair MacIntyre in the book After Virtue, and he said MacIntyre maintained that every society has three things, which are narratives, practice, and tradition. Every society has a right to determine and to tell the story of its existence, which helps them to create a tradition and practice. In this sense, he thinks that any society has a right to create a narrative that supports its tradition and practice. So the law against LGBTQ, according to him, is not about human dignity or dignity as human beings, but as consequence of association. I think we're going to visit this. Let's have Benjamin Timi's intervention. Please, Benjamin, go ahead.
I'll mute myself. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you for all the speakers. Mine is just a little bit of an emphasis on the importance the importance of narratives. You're talking about narratives now. The narratives will not just be limited to what is written down. Somebody spoke earlier and talked about the first gay person in their town or in so and so town. And I'm like, is that the first gay person or the first documented same-sex oriented person? These distinctions are very important, especially on the foundation, on the basis of an African society that had existed severally for years, centuries, but didn't have the modern writing culture that we have today. So how do we relate, apart from the research works that Rene mentioned, for instance, which were even more often than not, they are done by foreign researchers. Then maybe later on, maybe those trained in the foreign system. How do we catch these old narratives or build this narrative beyond what we know now in modern writing? How do we delve back into the period before we were writing? How, well, for instance, Austin talked about the ontology of the African person. This ontology wasn't really written down. I think it is just in recent times that we have been writing about the ontology of the African person. We cannot date this discussion about the ontology of the African person back to 200 years ago. I don't think there would have been any such written work about the ontology of the African person. But if it is there as a belief, then I think we should also ask that question of how did those African communities before the writing of narratives, how did they relate with difference? This is a very important question. How do pre-writing African societies relate with difference? Because difference would come in a number of ways. Sexual orientation, for instance, of course, in a society where reproduction is important, there would certainly be instances of people who didn't fit exactly into that reproductive vision of the human community or something. You know, so I think we have to, the narratives are still remains not totally consummated, so to say.
Thank you, Benjamin. Or you know, in relating to difference, you know that we have other forms of differences within
Yes.
African community. We have men with Ujbak, we have albinism and other forms, whatever, and we talk about societies in which they were even given special preferences. Like, let's say, for instance, in Yoruba, which they call them Eni Owo, for instance, Eni Owo, which means that Eni Osha. So they consider them as people who are associated with the deity, and their difference seems to be an elevation for them. So, what you know, the all questions of homophobic, lack of freedom of individuals seems to have a political side. But we're going to go back to this question of difference and all this thing. We have hands up. The first hand is Wulia, and then followed by Peter Kane, and then we still have Jim Parry. So, Wulia, please, you can go ahead to unmute yourself and take and have your contribution. Wulia Johanna. Wulia.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon. And
Wulia, we can hear you very well. Do you want to maybe your camera? If you off your camera, maybe that will help you to be smooth. We can hear you. While you do that, let's have Dr. Peter Kane. Dr. Peter Kane, is it still here? Okay. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me? Let me try to just return.
Okay, we can hear you.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm just I got the link quite late, but let me just make a few contributions. Okay. First of all, to thank all those who have spoken. The topic is quite a burning issue all over the world, and maybe especially in Africa. But my point, the point I wanted to make is that sometimes I mean, when I listen to conversations like this, I just wonder whether the same thing that has happened to Africa, I mean, those colonized communities or colonized places in Africa, the same thing is not happening with at the ideological level. What I mean here is that it appears that our own trajectory, I mean, the African trajectory of development, of social change, of ideological development is always sort of quickened, as it were, such that, okay, LGBT right now is being accepted. I mean, persons in this community are being accepted. Violence against them is preached against in the US. So every other place must immediately Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying violence against them is right. What I'm saying is these things happen through what we may call social change. So the kind of kickback we are getting in terms of people saying it's wrong, condemn them, I don't support that. I don't support condemnation of anybody based on their preferences. So what I'm saying is, but pushing too hard to say that we must change the laws, we must do this. Perhaps I'm just thinking maybe we allow these things travel their own course. So that gradually cultures, peoples within Africa will begin to see the need not to judge people based on their preferences, their choice, or who simply they are. So what I'm just trying to say, maybe at some point we need to be careful whether this is not, again, the kind of ideological push we get from the West, such that maybe we should look within and see how we can take our own course, our own journey, our own trajectory in bringing, in accepting at the individual level and institutional level, at the governmental level, accepting these people, not judging them, not on moral grounds, not on any grounds, but simply who they are. And then they themselves find a space for themselves within the community. This is just my own thinking.
And if you advocate that, you feel that you'll be supporting LGBTQ. If you speak for,
I didn't get you.
No, you are speaking from a country where LGBTQ has been considered 14 years imprisonment. If someone is a member.
Yes.
The question is that if you advocate for their human rights, for their respect and everything, they're going to be as being.
Now I'm saying. Yes, I get you. What I'm even saying.
Oh, you are muted.
Okay, let me unmute myself. So the point I'm even making is this, that I see that move by the Nigerian state during the Jonathan government as a reaction, okay? It was a reaction from the West, to push this agenda. It was a reaction. I mean, there wasn't that thought, there wasn't that consideration before to slam a law. I think the Jonathan government was pressured from within and from without. So at some point, the government needed to react, to say, again, it was react to this people, tell them you can't give us that kind of law, and the government just has to sign that. So the point I'm making is, if our own journey, our own course to accepting these ideologies, to dealing with our own situations here, we're allowed to move in our own trajectories, our own movement. I don't think, we would have gotten to that point to react. So in a sense, I judge that law as a reactionary movement, which is wrong. But again, it was a reaction to something that was coming from the West. So the government here had to react.
Okay.
But if things were left the way they have always been with us. LGBT people have always been with us. They have always been our friends, but maybe not in the open. Culture has banned it. But gradually, I think that they would have just found a place for themselves in society. And nobody would raise the kind of eyebrow.
Thank you so much for your contribution, because one thing unique about your contribution is you made it clear that the law against homosexuality in most countries are reactions. And
yes, there are reactions.
And the West is to bring for imposition instead of allowing natural cause. I think Wolia can come in. Wolia can come in and complete the point he was making. Thank you, Dr. Peter. Wolia, please, can you come in to make the point you were? Can you make the point you were struggling to make the other time, please, Wolia? And then we still have more hands up. Irene, please. Irene.
Oh, okay. Dr. Jim can go before me.
Okay. So Dr. Jim, Irene gave you the slot to go ahead of her.
Thank you, Irene. Dr. Peter Ikani, is it correct?
Yeah, Ikani, yeah.
Wonderful. I really appreciate your contribution there. And I like the way you brought out this what I'm going to call a kind of hysteria or hysteric hysteria, but it's this as you say, this political reaction to Western opinion. But maybe socially, I don't know, socially amongst Africans, a kind of hysteric response. And because even today, I think two of the people coming online, we have the sound of children in the background. I don't think we can seriously worry about the power of African culture to ensure the endurance of the family and children and reproduction. We are talking also. So what all we have to look at is this area, this question, this area of human life. The question or the reality of homosexuality in the world. That's all we need to go. But and perhaps along the way, you spoke about Africa having our own journey, and I loved that, because that's right, having our own journey and hopefully informed by authentic African knowledge, as for me as well. So thank you, Dr. Peter.
And Irene, do you want to go now at the points you want to make?
Yeah, if Walia is still not available. Walia.
Walia is still working on the internet, and there's some things that has unfolded through this conversation we have had.
Okay.
We notice a transition. The transition moved from the paper that gave us the whole idea that homosexual is in Africa. And what we have received from most participants, speaking from various African countries, is the fact that homosexuality is real in Africa, either from people who get to know about it maybe when they were in prison and they don't have access to person of opposite sex, or people who were born that way, or people who feel that way. And there are communities, there are families that even know people who are attracted to.
Hello.
Hello.
Let him make my input now.
Okay, please go ahead before the internet.
Okay. Many years ago, like about 3 or 4 years ago, I did a research on Calabar lesbians, of which I publish it as a book chapter. I call it Calabar Lesbian Cryptic Language. One thing is that from the research, I come to discover that LGBT is not something that is new to us. Like, you can find even their names in our local languages. For example, in Hausa, we call Madugo, and there is that's lesbian, and Ludu is homosexual. In Calabar, that is effect, we call it infrac. So this is a thing that has been existing with us. But how does African society look at these people? That the people at the margin, that the people that our culture does not permit like public expressions of such practices, because it's considered mythologically as evil. So as for me, I want the African society to remain like that, because my reason is this: we have been existing with them. We have having it as a friend. In fact, I come to discover that single schools in the northern Nigeria and even in the south, single school are the thing that as like instruments that propagate such kind of practices much more in this modern world. And that's why I center my research on the Catholic schools, single schools, government single school, like federal government colleges. I want us to, does this thing exist? Yes, it exists. We have it in our language, but African society has their own way of life. I don't want us to borrow any anything as called fundamental human rights from the United Nations, from the world around to impute into Africa. In my opinion, we don't do that. Let Africans stop copying from Western world. Let us do our own, the way we see our world. Hello?
Walia, sorry to interrupt you.
Are you hearing me?
Well, yes, we can hear you. But, you know, there's something I want to just underline from what you are saying. And just to be able to clarify your point. Your own point is that the existence of homosexuality in African society is not something that is new, but it's considered as an anomaly. That's what you're saying from your own research. That is considered as an anomaly and
yes.
Thing that is tolerated. That is tolerated.
Yes.
And if you look at it, can we use the same logic and say that what we call bestiality, having sex with animals, right, is something that exists and that is tolerated, okay, and that is tolerated, but they shouldn't ask for freedom to express themselves, you know, because one president has made a kind of a comparison between homosexual practices in Africa being an anomaly as bestiality is an anomaly. So this, you know, you look at the logic of, you know, putting homosexuality in the category of immorality. Do you want to bring it in the same category with bestiality as anomalies too?
One thing that we have to look at is that what is our setting in Africa? What's our own worldview? How do we perceive things? So we have to register things according to our own perception.
Okay.
Western world portray their freedom openly, which is according to their culture and society is accepted. But when we come to Africa, we are Africans. We still have families. There, the family is already destroyed. Somebody can just go and change his own sex and begin to behave the way you want, and it's accepted in that society. But if we do this in Africa, it's madness. In fact, there's a tendency somebody can even say that this person will destroy our children, so that let us eliminate it out of our society. So for that matter, I just see us, let us be African in our things, even in the context of our research, even in the context of our own worldview, how do we see world? By the time we establish our own, build our own structure, the whole world also will dance to our tune. I don't want us to be like, it's the freedom. What do we need freedom for? Most of the time, I used to ask myself, what do we need freedom? This freedom we are asking for, what do we need it? Is it in order to just behave anyhow? Or is it in order to just express ourselves only? So that is the thing that I used to like look at it. So this is my contribution.
Thanks.
I did that research.
And then you have dropped the paper in the chat, and then we will take a look at your research and have further conversation. I would just like to read some very good contributions we have been having, and before we make a kind of a review of where the conversation is, so that we can be able to know what we are making out. You know, there's a comment that I think in African context, some people refuse to see homosexual practices around them because it has existed for centuries and it's there to stay. I know that's from Mukile Kasongo. And so he thinks that, yeah, those things are there, but they don't want to talk about it. And it will just go on the ground if the law prohibits it. And it's my view that these laws are simply ridiculous because it's not Western import, contrary to what others have been saying, that is Western import is a reaction and not a disease, but a personal choice. And then we have Dr. Sydney has dropped some things in the chat. He talked about, he first learned about indigenous so-called homosexuality in Africa through African shaman. This Malidomal, you know, some Africans about the role of gatekeeper in the Ngara tribe of Burkina Faso. And he also expressed whether that naturally was appalled and shocked to learn that indigenous African homosexuality existed, and having always believed that originally there was no such thing as homosexuality in Africa, and finding that it did exist was a foreign import. That was what he believed. But he discovered that it was actually wrong, that those things have always been there. And when we're looking at the president who talks about homosexuality, as some other participants at this event from Africa talk about, this anomaly is immoral. You know, someone think it's a psychological abnormality. Another person felt, no, these are human beings and this is how they feel, and we are here to make further research on whether it's true. So Dr. Kwame Zulu is trying to say bestiality is a bad comparison. That if we bring bestiality into as an anomaly, like homosexuality, as some people think homosexuality is an anomaly, that they think goat can't consent to sex, human can consent to sex. So, but you know what the whole argument for comparison with bestiality has come from the whole idea of moral evolution. That people think that, okay, maybe there was a time that they felt it was immoral for people of the same sex to be having intercourse and to be engaged in intimate relationship, and that we're going to if the moral sense of or judgment, the value is going to evolve with time, and is going to say, oh, we are sorry, that to say, oh, you can't do that, and maybe there'll be a time too that bestiality too will evolve. You know, that has always been a kind of a constant comparison, and then the argument made by our brother Walia is the fact that it does not want democratic values, liberty, according to him, and that those democratic value of liberty that permits individual expression of their sexual orientation is not needed in Africa, and that if anyone thinks that the case of homosexuality and laws against them is a prohibition against individual freedom, for him, he thinks that those are Western interpretation of what liberty means. That liberty in Africa is not expressed that way. Anyway, we have Zednek Sloboda, who has joined us. He has always been part of our conversation. We talk about mixing homosexuality with bestiality is unfair, and why there is this aspect of consent. It is hard to assume that an animal can give a consent to sexual intercourse. But on the other hand, the homosexual intercourse, the Western understanding of it, happens in mutual consent, which on the other hand can't say about homosexual practice within, e.g. Initiation ritual, as such practices are culturally enforced to individuals. There are some video clips that I downloaded while we're preparing for this webinar, and we had cases of people being beaten on the street for enforcing homosexuality on others, of raping others, because they were not allowed to express themselves, because they can't go and talk to someone, you know, and say, oh, you are a male and I'm a male, and I want to tell the person I love you, and can we go into sexual intimacy? Out of fear, they end up raping people, you know, and out of fear, they end up paying minorities, you know, to be able to express themselves. And that's one of the things that the Reverend also made mention of, that prohibition leads to more crimes. And when those crimes comes into limelight, people are not going to, people are not going to look at the crime from the point of view of the person is just an homosexual. They're going to judge the person as being a rapist or enforcing that. And we also have Dr. Sidney talking about British-made law against homosexuality in Nigeria, not because they were merely imposing on importing their own laws on African soil, but rather they saw that it already existed when they came. And Kwame Zulu was responding to that. But, you know, if we look at the trend of the conversation we have had today, we realize that there is a kind of a transition from saying homosexuality exists in Africa, but is un-African, according to some people. And some people will argue that when it's allowed in African, it has a kind of utilitarian purpose. It's either it's used for initiation, or, and as Dr. Jim Paris will look at it, that still uncultural. You can still speak if I'm interpreting you wrong. For him, he still believes that it's still not cultural, because culture promotes procreation, a recognition of the fact of gender roles, and then the essence of intimacy, which he actually made mention of, and he even referenced the fact that in this conversation we have been having the voices of children in the background. But you know, if we look at the practice of homosexuality in the West and the advocacy that has been made by activists, Western activists, to encourage African activists, centers on the fact that they can also live a normal family life. They adopt children, and which is also, some people look at it from the utilitarian point of view, that also saves orphans to be able to have parents and house where they can grow. And also, they also get a lot of medical assistance because they can freely express themselves. But you know, when people, like, you look at the documentary or the video clips of some African presidents talking about homosexuality in Africa and talking about how dirty it is and how they are secreting from their anus and all sorts of things, and they presented it in those lights. Now, when they prohibit it, how will those people be able to get medical assistance? How, as the studies about same-gender intercourse, the kind of disease, you know, when we say heterosexual intercourse as some kind of disease that we can say sexual associated diseases. Now, do we know some other forms of sexual associated diseases that has to do with homosexuality? And if they cannot go to the hospital, because I can't imagine myself, if I am a member of LGBTQ community in Africa and I go to the hospital and say that I'm feeling a pain in my anus because I had an intercourse with my partner, and in the anus, the nurses and the doctors and other people will call police or beat hell out of me instead of even treating me or trying to look at the medical provisions. So these are some of the factors that are still being put in place. And I think that to a great extent, prior to the advent of colonialism and others, we know that there is tyranny of the majority in African society, where if the majority feels that this is what should take place, then they're going to ensure that everyone conforms to it. You know, and then we have some societies in which the minorities, you know, suffer a lot of other things, not just even the jungle justice that is going on. So we want to take contributions as we come to the end of the conversation around some of the issues that has been raised, and whether you have the consent or you don't. So I think Dr. Sydney, please, you can tender your contribution because you have been vocal in the chat, and it's good to call on you. You have been a member of this platform, and this conversation needs your contribution too. So Dr. Sydney, please, if you want to come in now, as you have your points already at least instead of reading out from the chat. Yeah. Unmute yourself. You have been asked to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I had been trying to unmute myself, but I wasn't able. How are you doing, my brother? And how is everyone? Very pleased to be here.
Good.
I don't want to spend a lot of time. I think if you give me 3 minutes and I'll finish. I was born in 1953. I live in Boston in the United States, so I grew up here, and so I went through the experience of what we call the revolution during the civil rights era, with the fight against the fight for civil rights, and during the 1960s, I was associated with the Black Panthers and other Black activism during that period of time. And during our struggle, homosexuality was not very tolerated because, you know, in our culture in the United States, we grew with a very chauvinistic, very Judeo-Christian sort of ethic, where we looked down upon that kind of behavior and activity. And so growing up and learning about how to be Black, learning about how to be African, it was thought, I thought, that homosexuality was an aberrant thing in our culture, and that we did not bring it from Africa, that it did not exist in Africa. And so we were very intolerant amongst ourselves. And so as I began to, become older and started doing more observation and research, I accidentally discovered that homosexuality, which by the way is a Western invention, that word itself is a Western invention. There's no word for homosexuality in African languages, as far as I know, but African homosexuality did exist. And I was shocked to find out, I was shocked to know that it existed, but I found out the way that I found out how it existed, it was through African spirituality. And it was through the writings of Maldioma Somé, through his expose on gatekeepers. Now, I know my brother Kwame has maybe some other views as to what he was doing, but I did not depend upon just his experience about gatekeepers in the Burkina Faso area of Africa of the Dangara tribe. There seemed to be other African spiritualities that had this kind of phenomena. So, and then I later learned, once I found out that it was something in Africa, I began to go into more research, and I started to discover that we saw evidences of same-sex behavior written on ancient African petrographs. So that the idea of African spirituality was something that was very natural, as it is in every part of the world. It's not just distinctly, a Western, phenomena. I think the pushback with respect to what we see about happening with homosexuality is seeing how the West has been so consumed with it, and in the way that they have almost like, pushing it. And I think that this is where the sensitivity of most of what we see happening in Africa with what they are resisting, what they see as a Western emphasis on this idea of homosexuality. For instance, in Zambia, the Zambian president is not going to have any good dialogue with the ambassador from the United States on this question of homosexuality. This has become a concern for Western African nations, or all African nations who are battling this as something that has come in. The sensitization of this whole idea and subject is a result of a culture coming into Africa from the West. And that Western culture is a Judeo-Christian type culture. And they see what is being happening in those countries, like the United States in particular, where the United States has been sort of opening its doors and its understanding and its ideas and so forth with respect to the subject. And they see that now it's infecting how we understand the articulation of our culture in education and our social conduct and so forth. And when you see these kinds of things being taught to children, gender identity, sex education, and intersectionality, sexuality, and all these other things being taught to children as far as young as kindergarten. To me, a person who believes in human rights, to me, a person who acknowledges and accepts same-sex, people who engage in same-sex behaviors, who is tolerant of them, who considers them as human beings, and who recognizes them as the right to exist as human beings with all the rights that they should have as human beings. To see that kind of thing happening is kind of shocking to me. And I think that what we see happening in Western culture is what I think African nations who are resisting this homosexuality agenda, they fear this, and they don't want to see the same thing happening in their nations and in their society. So that's how I see these things happening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dr. Sidney. There's a question by by Zednek, which was presented, the question has much to do with African way, the whole idea of African way, you know, in the global community, you know, because there's this whole idea of let African evolve by itself and be able to determine what they think should be democratic values. The whole idea of let Africans have their own form of expression of homosexuality and control it the way they want it to be. And then, so the question could still go back to, can there be an African way? After all, even Christianity and Islam were imported to Africa from different cultural areas. And in line with that question that he has just asked, which I know that those who have advocated for the African way in this conversation will respond to that. In line with that, I think that there is this conception in the mind of the West that democracy was brought to Africa. Human rights was brought to Africa. Women's rights does not exist. Education. So the whole thing is whatever we discover, like they have discovered, okay, at some point LGBTs were not allowed to express themselves. Now they have been allowed in Europe and Western world to express themselves. So Africa, what are you doing? You have to just follow since everything that existed. There's this conception. And I feel to a greater extent that it's not true, because they feel that when people talk about Christianity was brought to Africa, the Christianity in Africa is not the Christianity that was brought to Africa. It's expressed itself within its cultural and social realities. And that's why what existed is more than Christianity syncretism, because it still expresses itself within religious beliefs, you know, that also has some framework. The same thing with Islam, that some people want to express that maybe those things. So this whole conception that human rights, democracy, the democracy in the West, is it the same democracy? And that's why I think that the all, what we can say, getting back the past, as Timi made mention of the need for us to look at how were differences treated in previous African community, and to say this is how we are going to treat the differences that existed among us. Instead of saying we need to have them, we need to have this framework of the West to be replicated in Africa. At this point, I think that Wulia want to respond to because Wulia has been an advocate of African way. So Wulia, you can go ahead and respond to Zadek while I hand over to Irene and Mukili to take over the course of how the events ends and goes. So Wulia, please give your contribution, very brief. Do we need to make him to unmute himself?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Wulia.
Okay, thank you very much. When we look at Africa, before let's trace Africa to prehistoric Africa. Africa is not one society. Africa, when we talk about Africa, we have different cultures, different languages, different settings, and we're not like Europeans that they have the same history. Africa doesn't have the same history. Africa has different settings where our villages are considered as countries. As you can count, the more you count villages, because every village has their setting, has their laws, has their own every kind of worldview that is different from the next village. Now, in the African way, when we talk about the African way, is that Africa has the way of expressing human rights, and we are okay with that. Western world has their own. Let them hold their own there. Why I'm talking about that is that in Africa, like for example, like in the northern Nigeria, do you know that homosexuals have been existing among houses for even before the coming of colonial masters? Before, in fact, we see them on the streets, but we consider them as people that are doing bad things, like immoral people. And then people that want to associate with them, they can go with them. But our society still remain healthy. Nobody has ever gone there and killed one person that because he's a homosexual. Come to even Abuja here in Garki village, you will see homosexuals. but they are not permitted to harass anybody. They are not permitted to show it to the public and say that they are homosexuals, even as they are known. So I want that African setting to be continued like that. Know that, because of expression, somebody will just say, okay, today we want to say, let all homosexuals begin to practice openly. You are causing chaos. It will cause chaos in our African society. There is accepted. The chaos there in the Western world is different from what we call chaos in the African setting. Thank you.
Augustine?
Oh, sorry, Wolia, if you look at it from another perspective, what he's trying to say that we are in a sort of a global village, in such a way that your cousin or your relative who feels that, homosexuality from the society is coming from in Africa will come to Europe or to the UK, for instance, and thinks that that is immoral, or begin to use a judgmental eye at them, or begin to think something is wrong with people who belong to such community. That's one. Number two will be the case of those who travel to the West and they begin to express themselves in what we call it, their sexual orientations, and they are homosexuals. And they get back to their African countries and they are being discriminated, or they don't want to have the ceremony for them or recognize their partners as theirs. So what we're trying to look at is, even though we can say African is not excluded from the world, and then we are all in the diaspora, so the truth is this: how do we say we have a sort of moral yardstick within our own African communities, and we have our own expression, and yet when we are also existing in the diaspora, and we also have an evaluation of what should be or not be. So that's what I think is talking about when you talk about the global. And then if you look at it from that point of view, how do you react to that, Wulia, from your own Africanist ideology of having a varying yardstick of moral standards? Hello, Wulia. Do we need to ask him to unmute himself then? Ask to unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much. Even when we have internet has made us to have what we call global village. But do you know that it's just virtual world? It's just virtual world. We cannot touch, we cannot feel, we just see each other as if we are connected around the world. The world is not connected. Are we physically touching each other? Do we have physical impact on each other because of internet? No. Now, because of movement, now as an African, if I go to Europe, I have to obey the rules and the regulation of Europe because I am in their own land. Likewise, in African setting, before they come up for colonial masters, if a one villager want to move to another village, they have to signal the other village that our person want to come and see relation in the next village if they are not related, and permission has to be given so that the thing will not cause any war or any hiccup. So what I'm just talking about is that we have our own way of perception. If I go to Europe, I must abide with the European rules.
Is it okay
in order to live peacefully?
Is it okay to be homophobic?
Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Is it okay to be homophobic? Is it okay? Because your claims will be considered.
No. Wait. No, it's not about homophobic. We are not afraid of homosexuals. We have them here. As I'm saying, we have them here, but we're not afraid of them. We are not coming from the perspective of homophobic. I'm coming from the perspective of seeing our own world. We have our own African world, how we see. We have them among us, but we don't like. If they need something, we give them.
Then why do
they need house? We give them.
Why do you think
we are telling them that
why do you think
they should not practice?
Is justified? The law against them. Why do you think is justified when other countries across the world is giving them?
Okay, wait. Yes. Now, we are not global. We don't have one president in the world. we are sovereign states. We give our law according to what is happening in our own setting. Our law, the way we see the world is not global. We see world according to the sovereign state, according to our own country, how things should be done in order to maintain the peace and coexistence in our setting. So if the world is imposing on us, we see it even they are violating our sovereignty. They are violating our sovereignty. So we have the way to do our things. So let us do it that way.
Thank you very much. African Researchers Network is not standing by that because we stand up against every forms of discrimination, and then we look at the logic and then we reason along with you, and then we're going to look at all this descending position, and then we're going to have another series of this conversation. We really appreciate all those who honestly has offered their contributions to this discussion. Thank you, Wolia, because what you have, the position you have presented is what a lot of people are running away from, being called name, being considered as homophobic, but it's also a free world where you can also express yourself. And then we have asked several positions, the position of those who think is a psychological abnormal, those who think that it can only be found out of abnormality or restraint. We have even religious individuals who feel that it's against the commandment of God or against religion, but human dignity and human life should be respected, and these people should be protected. We have the positions of talking about, even if it to be accepted in African society, it's not going to be through impositions or laws. And the current laws that existed in African community, especially laws that were made during the time that we have Western leaders coming to Africa to enforce and to make it like we're going to remove all the privileges you are getting and even favor will be withdrawn. They made those laws as a reaction to define that they are sovereign nations. But the whole thing has come to the fact that we have those who have advocated that let African society evolve, convince people individually, let the people be the one to say, okay, we have listened to this and we understand the biological component of this form of sexual expression. We understand the psychological or whatever forms of components, and we as a society, we are embracing this. And we look at the position of the last contributor, which has much to do with the fact of African autonomy. I think its reaction is more or less to the fact that dictating to people, continuous dictating to a group of people as if they are to be told what should be done, or defining the realities that is before them, telling them what exists or what does not exist, and using some few anthropological cases to define things. So it's like discover Mungo Park. Who discovered this river in Africa? Mungo Park discovered River Niger. What about those who have been there before? So when people begin to make some epistemic or books and publications and try to present it as if homosexuality does not really exist, or they don't know what it is, or they don't know, as if there were no other forms of control, governance, and how the society is being educated. At this point, we're going to put an end to this interesting conversation. We thank our speakers. We thank those who have contributed before this event. We thank those who refuse to show their faces or to even log in to the channel for this conversation. And it's been very tough to prepare for this because we have speakers who are learned speakers and who belong to LGBT communities. But some people are afraid to come to a platform where they feel that they might be bullied, you know, and that they might be considered as immoral and whatever they are saying. And most times when you invite even people who are members of LGBTQ, sometimes they may not trust you because they may think maybe your religious affiliations and other forms already define your position. So organizing this particular event has been a little bit tough and faced a lot of logistics, but we really thank those who have come to the platform to contribute, to our members, and to all those who are new to ARN. So at this point, I think I will hand over to Irene and Mukile. I think I'm done with my job as moderating the conversation, and hand over to those, the host and the co-hosts for today, Irene and Mukile, to give other vote of thanks and announcements.
Okay, thank you. Our next webinar, well, before I do the announcements, just to wrap up, thank you everyone for participating. Just like Austin has said, it was not very easy to organize this event. Well, it was easy in the beginning, but towards when it has to happen, we came across a lot of hiccups. Our speakers pulled out, some felt they could speak off camera, but when we had to do the off camera recording, they pulled out. And out of this discussion, I've learned a lot, because I think at some point I understand why they felt like they are not safe or free to come out and speak, because from our discussions here as scholars, everyone who joined this discussion, I wanted to say something, but I kept on saying, let me give other people a space to speak, because well, I'm a host.
Irene is frozen.
Each other. And for the just by simply saying it comes from where it originated, where it has been here, and saying no, we shouldn't let it be practiced. Like how do you tell people not to live by who they are, because that's who they are, and how do you tell them no, you can't come out? That is like I would say it's infringing their human rights. And here in Southern Africa, I'm in Lesotho. So the common practice that normal people, I would say, that how they discriminate people of homosexuality or the LGBTQ community. In most cases, as a journalist, I've worked in South Africa and in Lesotho. And in South Africa, a common practice of discriminating them or violating them, they are violated, especially lesbians, by corrective rape. And gay people, they experience mob justice. People would say, no, we fight you because we want you to take out the man in you, because when you fight, you were born a man, so we know if you fight, the man in you will come out. So those are the kind of discriminations. It's in Lesotho, I think we are still fortunate as a country that is surrounded by South Africa. I think we are still fortunate that we haven't experienced such violence against the LGBTQ community. But I think there's here in Lesotho, it's even worse, because as community members, like when Reverend was presenting, he did say, yes, we are here for dialogue, but we are not allowing anything to happen. You see, people are saying, yes, we can listen to you, tell us whatever you're telling us, but we are not going to change because of what you're saying. And
Irene seems to be frozen.
people are people, but you're having a conversation with people who are already not willing to learn anything. In a way, I would say you are conversating with yourself, but with other people. They are just there to sit, not even to listen, because if they're already telling you that we won't change. So the struggle is, yes, we know there are people, but we are not willing to accept them, and we are not willing to learn their lifestyle, and we are not willing to accept them for who they are. So I wish we could have this conversation in the next coming webinars. Before I pass on to Mukule, let me just quickly do the announcement. Our next webinar next month, we are discussing who is an African. It's next month on the 21st of May. And yeah, we hope maybe.
Sorry about that. I think Irene is frozen again.
And we have our speakers for that time, myself included. Mokile, over to you.
Clay?
Yes, Mokule.
Okay. Hello, hi, hello. Yes, thanks, Arita, and thanks again, everyone, for the wonderful conversation. As you know, it's been very interesting, you know, and in different we hear a lot of different things about Africa. You know, I'm from Congo, and there's no criminal law against homosexuals, so that's just to tell you that it's complicated. But yes, I just want to thank everybody for coming, the speakers, to the participants. It was very well. And we hope to see you again in our next webinar, which Ariel has already mentioned. And we'll have a lovely weekend with you and all your family. And see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Zadek.